Welcome, everyone. I now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Governing Committee to order. We start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. This is a hybrid meeting, as are all of our meetings, so there is a physical location as well as virtual access. Our in-person location is at Seattle City Hall. I want to thank City of Seattle for that. So, Austin, would you please take the roll?
Absolutely, Chair. Member Backus? Member Balducci? Member Barone?
Here.
Member Burney?
Here.
Member Constantine, I believe is represented by Deputy Executive Braddock.
Deputy Executive Braddock, here. Thank you.
Member Green? Member Harrell?
Here.
Chair McWhorter Jr.
Here.
Member Moore, which I believe is represented by alternate Thorson.
Here.
Member Nelson, which I believe is going to be represented by alternate Ellis.
Here.
Member Prince. Member Salcedo, and I'll go back once more. Member Backus?
Yeah,
I'm here.
Perfect. Chair, it looks like we have 8 of 9 currently. I will be reaching out to the Balducci office to see where she is. Oh, she is in the room. Perfect.
Excellent. Excellent.
And 1 second, let's get her promoted up here.
Yeah.
And Member Balducci.
Here.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, we have all 9 present. We have quorum.
Thank you, Austin. We acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people, past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. We also have public comment today. Each member of the public gets 2 minutes. If you are in Zoom, please raise your hand now, and our clerk, Austin, will call on you in the order received. If you're in person at City Hall, please get in touch with Taj, and she'll sign you up and get your name on the list. Public comment will be open after the leadership updates. We now move to the consent agenda, where we have 2 items on our April 24th regular meeting minutes and the June 24th special meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
Chair.
Is there a second?
Second, Balducci.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, the motion passed. And we're now proceeding to our leadership updates from the core team of the KCRHA. Lisa, James, and Karen, you have the floor.
Thank you. Karen's going to start us off with a staffing update, and then we'll go in from there.
Good morning. I'm Karen Williams, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Interim Director of People Operations. I have a few staffing updates for you. We currently have 4 open roles in our finance, compliance, and program divisions, and we have 3 upcoming open roles. So far, year to date, we have 14 new hires, and we have 3 offers that have been accepted that will be starting in the coming weeks. Some of those key hires are our CPO, which we're very happy that will be starting on July the 30th. We have 2 new program directors that have recently started in our programs division, as well as our procurement manager. We've also made several hires in our finance division. Our contracts department is fully staffed. Our compliance department will be fully staffed by the end of July, and a few more key roles. So we're looking forward to the finance team and the programs team being fully staffed by the end of August. We've had 14 separations so far this year. Our year-to-date turnover has been 16%. That's compared to 52% in 2023, which of course included the P4Z reduction in force. And that's all I have for you. Any questions? Well, thank you. I'll turn it back over to James.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, I was a little slow on again. I did have a few questions.
Good, Mayor.
Yes, and I apologize. I'm out of town and packing to get back to lovely Seattle, so I'm going off camera on occasion to pack. My question is, first of all, congratulations on new hires. It sounds like we're staffing up and filling some gaps to do some great work, so I'm very excited about that. In light of the fact that there's been obvious transition with the new CEO coming aboard, and we've been trying to address this issue during the interim CEO's part, and now, can someone just describe to me, like, who's making the decisions? How are these decisions being made? Are they ramping up before the CEO becomes, or should they slow play a little bit and wait for that guidance? I'm not casting a judgment. I just sort of want to know the rhythm of staffing up the organization to better understand the culture. I trust that these are good hires and good decisions, but I'm sort of in the dark in terms of how these decisions and who are making the decisions go. So is anyone in position just to sort of describe the current culture of hiring and how we're going about it?
Our leadership hires have been in conjunction with the core team. Our staffing and compliance and programs, we've sort of business as usual. We wanted to staff these key positions before our CEO starts. However, there are 3 or 4 more executive positions that the decision was made to wait for the CEO. So it's been a balance between the two. Those decisions have been made by the senior leadership team and the core team.
That's very helpful, Karen. So how many people are on the senior leadership team as you're describing it? And so these are this senior leadership team are trying to fill key positions in preparation for the arrival of the new CEO, but then this senior leadership team are probably also thinking about which ones they should keep vacant for. I mean, just again, walk me through the rhythm a little bit.
Absolutely. The senior leadership team is composed of our CFO and our external affairs senior director, our executive assistant to the CEO, as well as our loaned executive Hedda from King County. There's 4 folks on the senior leadership team, and there's, I believe, 7 of us on the core team. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yeah, and then how are you going about with your outreach for these positions? Are we using a firm or consultant, or just open it up and see who's applying? Is just trying to, again, when I use the word rhythm, I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, for these recent roles, we have not used any recruiters. We have had some pretty good applicants, obviously. When we go to fill some other key roles, the equity director and some others, there's a possibility that we'll use recruiters, but we kind of make that decision on a role by role basis.
And then and did I understand during the earlier report that there are some positions that are yet to be filled? What positions are those, and are we trying to fill those before the CEO arrives, or might we keep those open until the CEO starts?
Yeah, we won't have any more key roles posted until the CEO arrives. Those will be the CFO and the external affairs, as well as the director of equity and diversity. And those are the key roles that we wanted to wait for the CEO to come on board, which is July 29th.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for answering my questions. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Okay. Lisa, thank you. So I wanted to just let everyone know that we did submit our budgets to King County and the City of Seattle. The IB did approve a resolution for us to do that. Within that resolution, though, there was originally a budget, a stabilization budget that we preliminarily submitted, and then we received back guidance from the city to have a different direction in which to submit our budget. So the budget that we did submit, which is on the next slide, is different from the stabilization budget. We submitted a stabilization budget of about $269 million. And next slide, please. And this budget here that we submitted to the city is $230 million. And what we'll do is we'll send you all the full presentation with all the details behind it of what was submitted to the city and county. So this way everybody's fully aware. Within that within that resolution, there was a comment about the stabilization budget being a preference for the IB board. And so the reason I bring that up is because the impacts from the stabilization budget would be that it would prevent a programming funding cliff of $5.9 million, which maintains service levels of 17 projects across 12, prevents the loss of 300 shelter beds, inflationary increases for our continuum of care contracts of about $530,000, tiny home, village services, and staffing of about $2 million, and central district for Black men, $2.4 million. That stabilization budget would prevent those losses of those services. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. What we'll do is we'll send the details of the budget that was submitted to the city and the county, so this way this entire board has it. That's all I have for budgets. Does anybody have any questions?
I had a question. I'm sorry to be so questiony.
It's all good.
The funding gaps, the losses that we're talking, those were, if I'm not mistaken, those were full-time COVID funds, or were those, what were those funds that were short? Yeah, a lot of it was related to the one-time funding that goes away. So that's a big portion of it. And then there was an exercise that the city asked us to do to reduce our budget by anywhere from 2 to 5%. And I think I forget the exact percentage that we landed on. I think it was 1% or 1.5%, something like that. I'd have to go back to the details, but yeah, so that most of it is the funding cliff, and then loss of the COVID dollars, and then that reduction. And can you say a little bit more, James? This is very helpful, by the way. And we're not, this is not news to us. We've been sort of made aware of what's going on, so we're looking at this very critically to make sure we keep some beds one way or the other. So we are aware of this, and thank you for being so transparent on the information. And are these all Seattle beds that we're losing? Are these some Seattle, some outside the city of Seattle? Can you describe a little bit about the beds we're losing? Possibly losing, say? Yeah, I believe it's mostly in Seattle that we're losing beds. But some are outside of Seattle as well, we may think. I'd have to go back and check the details and get back to you on that. But okay, no worries. Thank you, James. Yep. See, Balducci.
Thank you. Yeah. I was just scanning through the packet. I was looking for where can we see what you were reporting verbally about where the reductions are. I can see the comparisons between the 24 revised budget and the 25 proposed budget, but I can't I can't
Yep.
crosswalk that with this slide to what's happening with the rest of this slide and the reductions that you described. But I think I found it in the packet. Is it the memo on page? Well, that's not, they're not paginated. Can you point out to?
So it's not within this packet. It will be in the packet that I send to you after this meeting is over.
Okay.
It'll be within the whole presentation that we gave to the IB board. It'll have all the details, and it'll have all the crosswalks and everything. It has a lot more detail. We were trying to be very brief because this is just a leadership update, but I thought it was really important that everybody is aware of the budgets that were submitted to the city and the county.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Barone?
Thank you, James. Well, I first just want to note that I appreciate all the work that the leadership team is doing during this leadership transition. So I acknowledge that you're all short-staffed and waiting for the agency's new leaders. So I just want to thank everybody for their hard work during this time of transition. James, I just wanted to ask you. I had the same question that Mayor Harrell had about the cliff, for my first question is just to confirm there's also in the packet, and there is something in page 27 of the packet that outlines the 4 different areas where there's expiring one-time funding, including $4.2 million from King County. And I just wanted to, I'm assuming that is also kind of federal COVID relief money that is expiring. So James, that would be my first question. And the second question would be, if, and I know this is maybe hard to predict at this point of the year, but do we anticipate, given what we know currently, that there could be any underspend in any of the other programs that could potentially be carried over into next year to mitigate some of the cuts that we're discussing?
Yeah, I mean, there's always underspend, right? Historically, what I've seen is there's always been some underspend, but whether it's going to completely take care of these dollars that are getting lost for next year or not, I don't think it's going to be that large. We will be doing a further analysis on our underspend. Right now, we don't have enough information for the year in terms of what we spent so far this year. We get a better read of that after Q3. And we don't even have all of Q2 data in, right? We're just receiving or just have received the June invoices at this point. And so they haven't all been processed for us to completely close out the first 6 months of the year for us to get a good read on where we are with underspend. But typically, if I just go historically and look at, what last year's underspend was and what the year before was, I think there is going to be some dollars there that will help shore up some of these stop gaps. But we already have providers that are asking for some of those dollars this year that we need to make whole, that were impacted by this year's in fiscal year 24's budget. So we're trying to shift dollars around. And so I think the underspend that we're going to see at the end of this year is going to be much less than what we've historically have seen. But yeah, that would be utilized towards shoring up some of these stopgaps or trying to prevent the beds or whatever, loss of beds or shelters or whatever. Did that answer everything?
Yeah, James. Yeah, and I guess just following up on is your understanding correct or my understanding correct that the King County cliff is mostly from federal COVID relief funding, or do you know if there's other sources in there?
I will have to double check, but I think most of it is related to the COVID dollars. There is other one-time fundings that are there, but I don't think it's that significant. Jeff is joining me, so he might be able to answer this a little bit more clearly. Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, you're welcome, James. Yes, that's correct, Member Barone. The the maybe not perfectly 100%, but the vast majority of it is all related to the way the county utilized one-time COVID resources that came from federal funds to stand up and operate these programs. And also my understanding is that state funding has made it possible to ensure the continuation of those programs despite the loss of the federal resources.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess we can move on to Lisa for severe weather updates.
I'm sorry, James, I just had one closing. And again, I'm a little in transition, as I described earlier. The agencies that were spending the money to do this good work, were they, I'm trying to figure out how the conversation went, whether they, it seemed like they were using permanent solutions for temporary money or one-time monies for remedies that were more sustainable in nature, as opposed to knowing it was one time. Can you walk me sort of through what either the expectation was or what our agreements are? Because if in fact we have this budget challenge, we're trying to understand what's sustainable and what was sort of set up to be temporary and how they were spending the money. Yeah,
that's actually a really good question. And I'll say a little bit, and I think I'll let Jeff jump in on that too. There is probably in the beginning, when the COVID dollars came, there were solutions that were thought to be temporary, that one-time dollars were going to be needed for, and some of that has turned into permanent solutions. It was actually getting people off the streets and putting them into shelters and beds and housing. And so what we're finding is that there is a need to continue those programs rather than them to be the short term. But Jeff, you probably have more clarity on that than I do. You're on mute. So Jeff is having some technical problems with his...
There we go. Apologies there. Yeah, I had technical problems with my computer, so I'm joining from a phone, and it's a little more cumbersome. Thank you for your question, Mayor Harrell. There's probably 3 buckets that I would categorize there. The largest dollar amount is related to programs that since September of 2020 have successfully received one-time funding to support largely operations that are like staffing things like that. There have been modifications to shelter operations. That's something that I know our prior budgets have highlighted in previous years. It's something we've worked with your staff on multiple times now to resolve and ensure the continuation of those programs. The next bucket is, before I actually proceed to the next bucket, I want to highlight that all of this is also in the operational work plan that is provided to the board today as a discussion of our one-time funding. I believe it's around, I'll locate the page number for you, but I'll also be sure to highlight that when we get to my part of this meeting today to make sure that's highlighted for you and I can direct you to the right spots. But that second bucket is a program that has initially received 3 years worth of federal COVID funding in order to support its operations. There was an expectation that it's a shelter serving Black men in the Central District. The expectation was that program might be able to move into operating as permanent supportive housing. The housing resources for that haven't materialized at this point, and the initial 3 years of startup for the operations of that location as a shelter is what is now being lost. It's about half the total funding that program receives. And then the third major bucket would be funding decisions that were made by the city council last November, where the operator of Tiny Home Villages in Seattle was given a reduced amount of funding overall relative to the prior fiscal year, but then also some of the funding that it was given to continue certain operations into throughout this year was again just using one-time funding. So there's a $500,000 further reduction on Tiny Home Villages. So there's kind of 3 different buckets. They all have different histories, and it's easy to confuse all of them. And I also am happy to follow up with either you or your staff, or like I said, I'll cover this in a little more detail shortly if it's helpful.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a very good answer. I guess what I want to sort of make clear is that I will continue to ask our team at the City of Seattle to aggressively find grant money, one-time money, often. We will try to, of course, have as much sustainable funding as we can, but one thing we're trying to do, and it's just not for homelessness strategies, it's for transportation monies, other capital projects, housing, that we want to be the master at taking advantage of our federal delegation, get federal dollars, et cetera. And what needs to happen is that I'm expecting the Housing Authority, Homelessness Authority, to be able to make a sharp distinction between one-time strategies and sustainable strategies. That as subject matter experts, I'm hoping that we don't confuse the two, because therein lies the problem that we have what could be called a cliff. And we have to be able to think what short-term monies can do, what the ROI is on that, as opposed to sticking them all in the same bucket. That puts us between a rock and a hard spot when we don't have sustainable revenue sources for some of the other strategies. And I think that's sort of I don't want to cast judgment. Perhaps that is what occurred, is that as we try to shelter people and address the issues, we just take the revenue and spend it where we think it is best served. But I think under the new administration, we have to sort of segregate our strategies between using one-time monies and sustainable funds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And transparently, this is quite to your point in your description of it. These were decisions that were made actually before the inception of KCRHA, before you were elected as mayor, certainly with a different city council. And some of those decisions reflect exactly what you described.
Yeah, and I don't say that to cast aspersions or judgments on anyone. This is tough work. I mean, you're trying to save lives, literally. And so, but I think if we get a little smarter in our approach, particularly moving forward, because again, our team will aggressively try to find this in funding, whether it's sustainable or one time. And I don't want to always be in a situation where I'm trying to figure out, well, the one-time funding went away and we have to change our strategies all of a sudden or scramble to find funding. So, okay, I think the point's been made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing? This is Balducci. I know this is not the time or place. I'm a little out of order, but this discussion is making me think that when we start thinking about 2026 and future budgets, I wonder if we shouldn't consider doing something that looks like outcome-based budgeting. I know you want to have your feet under you before you try something new like that, but the idea being that it would focus our funding on explicit outcomes, and it would be, I think, a way to communicate to the public what their money is getting them. So I just want to put a pin in that for some future conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lisa, back to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll just do a quick severe weather update. So we are currently in our first heat activation of the year. It began on July 5th. It's going to continue. We just extended it yesterday to Sunday, July 21st. It's been a mixture of tier 2 and tier 3. It's been mostly tier 2. So this prolonged heat wave has been important for us to activate. It's the first one for the year, which also puts our unhoused neighbors at risk. Just not them, just all of us really just getting acclimated to the higher temperatures. So here's a photo of Abby with our sub-regional planning team, putting in some cases of water into Carolina's back of her car. Carolina works for the Seattle's Unified Care Team. So that was part of this activation, was distributing supplies. And so here's just a quick rundown. So we distributed 84 cases of bottled water, 24 cases of sport drinks, 60 cooling towels, 32 box fans, and also while in tier 3 for those couple days, we set up a cooling station in Shoreline for folks to come and stay cool in the weather, because it can be dangerous for people who are outside. So again, this activation that we're in right now is going to continue until Sunday. And that's happening for severe weather. Any questions? Barone.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate the work that's being done. I was noticing, I was looking at the list of sort of resources that KCRHA is putting out, and I noticed that a lot of them are kind of existing locations like community centers and libraries that may have restricted hours. And I realized that this is really more on us as funders to make available resources for you, but beyond I think you mentioned the sort of tent and shoreline. What capacity does the authority have right now to activate kind of like larger, if we reach kind of like hotter later in the summer, if we get to like 100-degree weather, what capacity do we have to expand beyond those places? Because some of those locations only have, limited hours. They may not be open on the weekends, or even after 5 o'clock is actually when we're hitting kind of peak temperatures, and some of those locations are not open in the late afternoon or early evening hours. So could you just speak to what capacity we have to activate kind of further supports if we get into like a really intense, severe heat wave coming up?
I believe that would be a funding issue. We would be able to stand up some cooling tents if it were to reach up into the 100 degrees, like you mentioned. As far as like a structure somewhere someone could go in, that's a good question. I'd have to double check with the severe weather lead on that and get back to you. One thing that was different for this one was the Union Station that Sound Transit opened. So that's another space. I don't think a lot of people use that one this time around. But that is a place where they could go. We set up 4 cooling tents, 3 in Seattle and 1 in Shoreline for this activation. And for future, like I said, I think part of it is a funding issue, but I'd have to get back with you.
Great. I'd love to follow up with you on that. Thank you.
Member Backus.
Thank you. Lisa, thank you for the presentation. Just wondering, you just mentioned Seattle and Shoreline for the cooling tents. Is that because Shoreline did not have any cooling locations, or and the other cities did, or there was an excessive need in Shoreline? Just trying to understand how Shoreline was selected, other cities weren't, and understanding as well that you're saying that it could be a funding issue in the future. So just wanting to know about how Shoreline was selected.
Yeah, we were able to do Shoreline this time because of the North King County ILA that we signed. So there was specific money set aside for severe weather to set up that cooling tent, that cooling station in Shoreline.
And so the other cities that are part of that ILA had their own cooling centers. Is that why you didn't set them up in those other cities?
I believe the decision was made to do it in Shoreline because that would be the more like the central location for those cities that are part of the ILA, is where they chose Shoreline to do it there.
All right. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. If not, we'll send it back to the chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, James, Jeff, and Karen. Okay. We will now move on to public comment, which will be for 15 minutes. If you were not able to raise your hand or sign up, please do so now. And we would like to remind people that providing public comment, please keep your comments to an item that is on the agenda, and each speaker will receive 2 minutes. Austin, would you please open up public comment?
Absolutely, Chair. Taj notified me that nobody is currently at City Hall, so we'll move directly into Zoom. First up we have is Elizabeth Malpin. Elizabeth, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will begin after your test.
Is my mic working?
I do hear you, Elizabeth. Yep.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Maupin of Issaquah, Washington. I noticed in your budget proposal that there are no prevention dollars for any place and no diversion funds for the county. Since you're not doing that, and prevention is really key, one thing that you could be doing is, as the cities of King County, to support a bill in the legislature, the state legislature, for rent stabilization with a 5% per year cap. I have been a landlord. I have also rented in Seattle. Rents are a good reason why our homelessness count keeps going up. So that's one thing you could do that doesn't cost you any money. I noticed that you have a piece in there about unsanctioned encampments and a proposal that you could move 89% of those indoors. Does that just mean that you'd get them into shelter tonight? No long-term commitment? Perhaps one of the more useful things to do is to work on changing unsanctioned encampments into sanctioned encampments. Your sanctioned encampments in Seattle have worked very well, provided people stability for long-term in an area where there is very little affordable housing. And I wonder why Partnership for Zero, which seemed to be working well and getting on its feet, got killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up I have is Bill. Bill, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will start after that.
Well, good morning. Greetings to all of you on the governing committee. Thank you for your work. I'm speaking mostly on behalf of the Vehicle Residency Safe Parking Committee that was a part of KCRHA, sort of informally under Dones and Lynn when they were here. Now we're sort of on our own. I recently met with interim CEO Hedda McClendon. We had a good meeting. I gave her up to speed on what's going on with us and preparing the way to talk to the new CEO when she arrives. We've been working with the regional specialists in North, South, and East in terms of fostering this. It's the most underfunded section of homelessness, even though it still makes up 50% of the unsheltered. Unfortunately, too many jurisdictions still just enforce their laws. We've got some cities doing some things. I know Auburn has something. On the east side, Bellevue started its own safe lot, and we've got more safe parking in faith communities than we have anywhere else. We supported the RV safe lot that Lehigh has, but we don't think the $5+ million that's going to Seattle for safe parking should be used again for another safe lot. That is the most expensive way to remedy this. We've rolled out recently doing more faith-based safe parking. We met with 30 congregations in Federal Way recently. We're going to be doing the same thing around the county. The other thing we need, though, is jurisdictions to comply with us. I met with the sheriffs and chiefs in January. They want our help. They want our partnership. We've talked to Amy Smith in the CARES Department of Seattle to foster more agreeing HSD more partnerships with the police and HSD that lead to pathways out of vehicles. Everybody wants the vehicles gone. No one's providing safe places for them to stabilize long enough. So Mayor Harrell, I had mentioned some win-wins when we met at the safe parking RV lot. I hope you will let us talk to you soon. I've made many efforts, and I've made another recent one through Deputy Mayor Washington. So please invite us in for a conversation when you're back.
Thank you, Bill. Next up we have is Ruby Tuesday Romero. Ruby, if you want to test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will start after that. You have to unmute first.
I'm sorry, it's awfully loud where I am, but I just wanted to say we need more services for the heat. We need to have more than just shoreline available. Hopefully we can also do something about the bridge. They just lost 25 tiny homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. With that, I'm gonna ask, that was our last one who raised their hand. I'm gonna ask 3 times before we close public comment. If anybody would like to sign up in Zoom, please raise your hand. If anybody would like to provide public comment in Zoom, please raise your hand. And Chair, this will be my final ask and I'll close. If anybody in Zoom would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand. With that, public comment is now closed. Chair, it is back to you.
Thank you, Austin. Okay, we will now move on to Resolution 2024-13, which is the resolution removing member Felicia Salcedo due to absences. Is there a motion to approve of Resolution 2024-12? Excuse me, -13.
This is Member Burney. I'll move Resolution 2024-13.
Second, Balducci.
Thank you. Any other discussion? This will require a roll call vote. Austin, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Member Backus.
Aye.
Member Balducci.
Aye.
Member Barone.
Aye.
Member Burney.
Aye.
Alternate Braddock.
Aye.
Member Harrell.
Aye.
Chair McWhorter Jr.
Aye.
Alternate Thornson.
Aye.
Alternate Ellis.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes with 9 ayes, no nays, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you, Austin. Okay, we now move on to a presentation on the operational work plan from Jeff Sims, and we'll be voting on Resolution 2024-14, approving the work plan and receiving quarterly updates. Jeff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm going to get some assistance from Clerk Christofferson in putting this on screen. So thank you, Mr. Clerk, for that. I'm having a little difficulties. So if you raise your hand, I may not be able to see you. If you could help me out by chiming in if you have questions anywhere along the lines of my presentation. For the record, my name is Jeff Sims. I'm the Senior Director for Policy, and I use he, him pronouns. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Last year, this body requested that KCRHA put together a document that was titled the Operational Work Plan. It was adopted by resolution last November. KCRHA was expected to put that together, and then because of the pathway that our ILA dictates for us, we had to first present it to our implementation board so that it could come to this body for a vote. That has all occurred. KCRHA provided the substance of the plan on May 6th this year to both the GC and the IB, giving some opportunity for both groups to provide some comments. At its June meeting, the implementation board proceeded with taking a vote on that submission. And so that is what is being brought to the governing committee today. If we could go to the next slide, please. The components of that plan, which the resolution passed by the implementation board, they affirmed that all of the required elements of the plan had been addressed and provided that it met a satisfactory update on status for all of these items. But here is a list of them just for reference for all of you. Many of you, I don't believe quite everybody, but many of you were part of the deliberation around these, so you're probably familiar with these already. The first 2 items around the 5-year plan, the expenditure of new resources, making sure we're on track for that, including contracting updates. You may recall that last year, actually a little bit more than a year ago now, there was a lot of public press about the rate that contracts were being provided. Also updates on KCRHA's Ombuds Office, other major initiatives, and providing an organizational chart. So those are all elements that are provided in the plan at this time. And I'm going to go through some highlights from that in just a moment. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here again, I've mentioned many of these pieces already. This board first received a draft on May 6th of that update report. A revised version is what was included in your meeting materials last week for this meeting. There was only some minor changes clarifying really at the beginning what a vote by the IB was representing, and then also some display issues like putting a key for the bullets around the 5-year plan status and making sure that those are very clear. There were not major substantive changes. That, as I mentioned, was passed at the June 12th meeting of the implementation board, so that this operational work plan is brought to you all today. And there's an expectation, assuming you approve of that submission, that you'll be receiving quarterly updates. So the next one would arrive in October at a regular meeting for you. That will just provide updates as new information emerges on any of these topics or activities. We would be following up with that information. Next slide, please. So today's vote, just to make it really clear what we're asking you to vote on today, obviously that you're fully aware of the update, which is intrinsic in taking the vote, of course, that this mission meets the requirements that you intended with what you asked of us at the time, and reaffirming that the report is what you would like to see in quarterly submissions should new information emerge. There's some pieces, for example, a good one is there's funding that was awarded. It was provided in fiscal year 2023, so more than a year ago. That award has already been made. The project is already active and functioning, so we wouldn't be coming back to you with an update on the expenditure of those funds. We just allow that to move kind of into an archived item. If there's places where there is new information, perhaps a program that was awarded but not yet functioning, something like that, we of course would follow up in our quarterly updates with new information for this group. The next slide, please. So this is my first of 2 slides giving the very high level updates on what is in the submission that you received. I know that it's rather lengthy. There's a lot of material in there. I hope that you found it very informative. I did receive some offline questions on it, just getting clarification. And I think that I'm glad to see that so far it seems that we've fully encompassed everything that was requested and just had to point to the right page number. Sorry, but we were trying to be exhaustive and make sure you have all the information you're seeking. So first, related to new funding, we can report that nearly all of the new funding provided in 2023 and 2024 is not only awarded, many of those are actually operating contracts. Moving into the contracting piece, that was obviously a focus of this board and a source of public discussion in 2023. As we've shared with you a few times, KCRHA had all of our contracts renewed and ready to go in January, so that there were not any delays this year. Everyone had their funds available to them. Beginning the year, we were ahead of many partners throughout the region in that, and we're really pleased with that work, and we intend to keep that rate of progress and that rate of success going forward as we move into future years. With one-time funding, the report does discuss, and Mayor Harrell, you were asking about some of these. Member Barone, you were also asking about some of these pieces. And so I just wanted to be clear that there are some outstanding questions about that. We did highlight for the City of Seattle in our budget submission that James discussed some areas where there are some programs with some uncertainty around their funding. That has been highlighted and discussed previously. We are also working with state and county partners to make sure that and federal partners to make sure we're addressing any potential cliff as well. Obviously, our goal would be to Mayor Harrell's point, utilize our expertise, our capability to address these, to make sure that we're maintaining programs that are really vital to our system. And part of that will also be continuing to work with the City of Seattle, both Mayor Harrell and the Seattle City Council as they go through their budget process to address any potential impacts and look at those programs. The next item, rebid, as we've discussed previously in this group, and I know obviously we do have a new CEO coming, which was the instruction we received on when we should hold to. Obviously, Dr. Kinnison has not yet started with this, and she'll need a period of onboarding time, so things are still in a holding pattern with that at this time. The Ombuds work has actually been heavily presented to our implementation board, and many of those materials are either updated like briefly with you in this packet, or you're provided links for more exhaustive materials and updates so that you're very aware of the activity of the Ombuds. And I believe that they have another quarterly report that will shortly be coming as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. And the last the last 2 major areas I wanted to cover were around major initiatives. One component of the plan We first want to talk about our resolution of state-owned encampments that are located on state-owned property. We've talked to this group about that program before. We call it our ROW initiative, short for right-of-way. At the time of submission, we had resolved 13 encampments. It's now up a little to 90% of all residents at the locations that we've engaged in have moved indoors and are on a pathway to housing. It's been very successful, and also in terms of continuing to maintain the indoor status of those individuals and moving them into housing. Regarding wage increases and addressing the staffing shortages that our contracted partners encounter because of the wages paid in this sector, we wanted to highlight that funding was secured, and also want to tip our hat to the City of Seattle for not only meeting the COLA that we asked for, but also going further and providing a 2% further boost to directly address wages, and to our county partners for providing the funding to do that similar match, so that overall we were able to provide a 9.5% increase to projects this year relative to the prior year, which is helping to maintain pace with the rising cost of doing business and the difficulty that we face in retaining staff that are skilled and experienced in this work if we're not paying them adequately for the work that they're doing. There's a lot of numbers provided in the plan around our Medicaid submissions, which continues to be, despite the discontinuation of the Partnership for Zero initiative, an area that we were seeking to develop some lessons learned and go through Medicaid billing processes to understand how that could be leveraged and utilized as a funding resource for the broader homelessness services response. We have an 87% success rate right now with the reimbursements that we have submitted to the state. There are nuances there that are important that are covered in the report, such as the pausing of enrollments for the Foundational Community Supports Program. So our number of clients is not what we would have otherwise projected because we can't be enrolling new people. However, we already had many clients that were already enrolled. So we just continue the work to maintain that enrollment status, continue submitting billing. We're still able to learn some lessons from that initiative. And then we are still moving towards a real-time tracking of vacancies that arise in housing and shelter units. The latest information that I have, even beyond what is provided in the report, is that system, which is stated as being available in the summer, it looks like the housing components, actually they are all available right now. A program could voluntarily start reporting in the way that is now set up in HMIS. We're expecting a expectation of that for our housing providers first. That'll go live first, and still on track for by the end of the summer. And then shelter units, again, is available for them, but then moving towards the technical assistance with them to ensure reliable data reporting utilizing that system. I'm saying a lot and I can't see hands, so I want to pause and make sure there weren't any questions on what I covered before I also talk about the 5-year plan pieces. Okay, so on the 5-year plan, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Jeff, this is Bruce. I could wait till you've finished.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief with these next couple then. The 5-year plan, you can see if you go back a slide, thank you. On the 5-year plan, there's 54 activities in the 5-year plan that are called upon RHA to complete in the first 2 years of the 5-year plan. Of those 54, 50 of them you'll note there's a long chart, that's the bulk of this submission to you all. They all are marked as green. That doesn't mean they're necessarily complete. A lot of them are, but it means that whatever the plan is for that specific deliverable or activity to be completed to achieve that activity, it is on track. So if something was scheduled to already be done and it's marked green, it's done. But if something was scheduled to wrap up, say, in November of this year, a green dot indicates that it's still on track to be completed by this November. It's not yet completed. All of those activities that are marked green, or actually, let me put it a different way. The only activities that are not marked green are ones that are related to a system-wide reprocurement of funds, which, as I noted before, we're waiting until Dr. Kennison is fully on board to proceed with that work. So there's an intentional, and in collaboration with this board and our funding partners, intentional desire to have those on hold at this time. So we're making great work there. Lastly, I want to note that there is positive direction on 6 of the 8 performance metrics that are in the plan. Again, the ones that there was 2 that were not improvements. So one was in increasing the overall number of shelter beds. But looking at our rates of return to homelessness, length of time in the system, all the different types of metrics that were identified in the plan as the things we should hold ourselves accountable to, they are all moving in the right direction. I recognize that might feel out of sync with some of the public conversation, like our latest PIT release. The metrics that we're talking about are the things that we all have control over. How effectively are we utilizing our resources, getting people moved through the system, things like that. The larger environment where we know that the inflow into homelessness is exceeding the resources available to us, and hence our desire to go to every possible corner to look for those additional resources, that dynamic doesn't change. We're using what we have really, really well, but we are in an environment that's going to exceed what we have to respond to. And so that's why you see a little distinction between what happens with the PIT count, that is not one of these metrics, but continuing improvement and doing the work that we are asked to do. That's the area that we've been trying to focus on. With that, Mr. Mayor, if I could turn back to you and allow you to ask your questions.
Thanks, Jeff. That was very informative. Thank you very much. And thanks for recognizing what the city of Seattle is trying to do with respect to COLAs. We recognize this is very tough work and many are underpaid. So thank you for that recognition. I sort of have two questions. One is, as I understand the operational plan, or at least the quarterly, we'll do this on a quarterly basis. And so I'm assuming that we should do this now before the new CEO begins. But the first question would be, would it make sense for the new CEO to have some input on this quarterly plan, or do you, I guess you're suggesting we go ahead, we don't wait, and then we do it on the next one? So that's the first question. Should we wait, or should we just vote it out today? And I don't have a judgment there. I just want to know what staff would recommend. And number two, you recognize that in light of the shortfall based on the use of one-time funding, you're waiting for the city of Seattle's budget. Is the assumption from the authority that the full shortfall be absorbed and addressed by the city of Seattle, or is that a regional approach to how we might be able to address that? What's the assumption going in? So two questions.
Sure. Actually, let me address the second one first, which it is actually an assumption of a regional approach, especially working with the county and the state right now to address some of those pieces. That's the approach we're looking at. We've also utilized, to an earlier question, underspend on the KCRHA side. That's, for example, how many of those programs continued into this year. We immediately took places where a program was brand new, wouldn't open on January 1, reallocated those funding in partnership with the city of Seattle to utilize those funding for a subsequent year. So really doing the nimble analysis of programs and operations to make sure we're being really effective in the funds, just as you were discussing earlier, Mr. Mayor. On your first question, as I would make the staff recommendation that you proceed. First, the resolution that called for this plan laid out the timeline by which we had to present this to you. So it was required that we bring this to you for consideration today. Obviously, it's up to this group to determine if you want to take a vote or delay until Dr. Kinnison starts. But that goes to the second component of my recommendation. Many of these items, as I'm sure was immediately obvious, are not affected by the strategic direction that we would be going under our new CEO. These are largely things that have occurred. Even looking at the vote, that's why I highlighted what does a vote constitute today. We have, for example, proceeded with, we've got some funding in 2023. We've awarded that program is open, regardless of the leadership or even the vote that this group takes on the operational work plan. That status won't change. So really, this was intended to make sure that KCRHA is providing the comprehensive information to you all to be abreast of the full scope of our operations. Many of those things won't change. They are activities that have already occurred or are underway. And especially given that so many of them are in exactly the direction we would have sought, our recommendation would be that you still proceed with adopting this, knowing that in October when we come back, I would not necessarily expect that I'm the person giving this presentation to you. And also in some places there might be, for example, in the 5-year plan, if there are strategic or directional changes, that would be a discussion at that time.
Thanks, Jeff. That's very helpful. While I still have the mic, and thank you, Chair, for giving me a little latitude. You seem, the work on the Medicaid reimbursements looks very promising. We talked about that as a revenue source, 87% success rate. So I assume the authority's feeling very good about that achievement and about the pathway forward. Same thing with the online bed availability issue that is been around for a while. I mean, we've had a lot of challenges there, but it sounds like, I'm sort of curious how that works on a real-time basis. It's all online, but it sounds like we're pretty optimistic about that tool as well.
Yeah, I can go into some more details about that, though I'm not the best equipped. It should really be our staff that are part of the community impact division that could talk to you about the specifics. High level, the way that it works is if I'm a program, I've always had an inventory of the number of census or number of beds that my shelter, let's say, operates. The way that the system has been rejiggered is that instead of having just some kind of blanket number in the system, every bed is now delineated so that if I have 20 beds, and bed 13 opens up today, I mark that person as exiting. That will go through some prompts, and there's a lot of customization, things like that, and delays on like, turnover time according to this program, stuff that only they could really provide you that information for. But it ultimately then pops up in our system after going through that right process and algorithm as this is now vacant and available, and it would be up on a dashboard.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That's very helpful. Thank you.
For sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I failed to respond to the questions of Medicaid. Yes, obviously, we are very, very excited about that. The pausing of new enrollments in the Foundational Community Supports Program is very problematic. That impacts, I know that some of our partner providers are already talking to the state about that because the inability to enroll new people means that even though we are finding and learning lessons from our work, there's still gaps in our ability to implement that as a meaningful funding stream for the broader system.
Member Barone, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yes, Chair. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Jeff, thank you for the presentation. I want to echo my the comments that the mayor made about the good work that the authority is doing with regard to Medicaid and the wage increases. I think it's super important to support the workforce that is actually providing these services. I did want to ask you a couple of questions. So first of all, I will say that I'm supportive of moving forward with approving the work plan because I think the team has done the work that my predecessors asked. So that would be my position on this particular item. But I did want to ask a couple of questions about some of the metrics that are in the work plan and the report that we received. And I'm just wondering if somebody could talk a little bit. I mean, I think there were a lot of positive numbers and a lot of important things. And I think I don't want to not highlight that. So I think there's a lot of important things, particularly in terms of utilization numbers, which are very positive. But I did want to ask about the data that shows an increase in returns to homelessness after 6 months. That showed a 19% increase on returns. So curious if somebody could talk about that. And I guess I also just wanted to just note that my concern about that we lost some units in terms of temporary units in the report, and obviously we've been talking about this potential cliff that could put us in the wrong direction, and that's not, as I see it, not necessarily something that the authority has control over because that's on us as funders to make sure there are resources to continue increasing the capacity. But if somebody could talk about the returns to homelessness, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Member Barone, largely I'm going to have to ask that we follow back up after this meeting with you on that. When I presented to the IB, some members of our community impact team were able to join me. They have that more granular insight into the specifics of the data there and what may be some causes behind those trends. The director of that group is on extended medical leave at this moment. And so I wasn't able to bring that staff with me to be more responsive here, but we can work to get that to you later. I will note that the 12 and the 24-month returns to homelessness both decreased. So I don't know, how those numbers could all be simultaneously occurring. I'll say I'm really just not able to provide that insight.
Happy to follow up. Thanks, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Member Balducci.
Thank you. I'm only speaking up because you asked for feedback, and I at the top of the report about the format and the level of detail, I think this is a very helpful report. I want to state my support for continuing. The memo version does require a little bit of more advanced reading, but that's okay. It includes a lot of good information that I think is worth reading. The two pieces of feedback that I would offer are, I think this kind of report justifies a little bit of meeting time. So if you wanted to come and provide some more slides that had kind of the public facing substance of not just 14 of 17 recommendations implemented. Okay, a little bit about what did we do so that people who are following our work can take that on board, even if they didn't read the memo, I think would be worthwhile to be a little bit more communicative about all the stuff that's happening. And the second thing is, and I'm just going to beat a drum on this topic, what is the impact or outcome of each of these things? So, for example, let me just pick one. Looking at item R on the chart, the item is improve guests' connection to services beyond the severe weather event, and the action item is homelessness outreach contracts recompeted with this focus. It's listed as complete and green. So what did that do? What did that do for guests? What is their experience? And there's a number of these that you could think of, like the providers or the guests or whoever the recipient of the change is. What did it do? And maybe there's some surveying that we should do on an occasional basis to see if our efforts are actually changing the experience of people who are receiving services. But generally, just my opening and closing is, I think this is really moving in a good direction, and I look forward to continuing to receive these reports and evolve them and put them to use. Thanks for all the work on it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Member Balducci, for that response. On that specific item that you pulled out, I can't speak to all of these. I am not able to keep abreast of all 54 activities. As you can imagine, I'm certainly not tasked with the implementation of many of them. I do know that with the homelessness outreach contracts, there were specific new activities added to that, so that measurement was not just did you move someone into shelter or housing, but also there was a focus on additional types of service connections. And that's somewhat to the nature of that activity. If you have people arriving during severe weather response, that outreach agency then would also collaborate to make sure that it's not that you use that shelter bed for the night and then disappeared into the air, but ideally we've offered the connections there. I can't speak to our current heat activation. I'm not as, I haven't been part of the debriefs to hear some of that, the way that has been achieved. But I do know that with the prior severe weather activation, there was similarly, one of the outreach agencies did come to, I believe, one of the locations where people are at to assist with some of the examination of, coordinated entry enrollments, other kinds of service benefits, things like that. And so that is why you see there the statement of the outreach contracts being leveraged in that way, so that there could be some degree of, hey, while we've got a group gathered here, why don't you come and help with that further service connection rather than it just being one night.
Right. And I picked that one almost at random. It was more, I was trying to make a larger point, but I will say on that one, I used to work with a manager. In fact, I used to have a manager who worked for me, who I would say, did you accomplish that thing that we wanted the staff to do? And he would say, sure, I sent out a memo. And I'd be like, well, okay, you sent out a memo, you told them to do it, but did they do it? And so I think we want to get to the actual performance and impact at some point. And I know that gets to be, and then ultimately the impact is, did people use those services? Is that working? And every step along that way is a complex data collection and tracking task of its own. But I'm just like getting at, like, are we putting our efforts in the right places? And this was just a random selection. I'm not, please, anybody working in this space, I'm not picking on you. I was just scanning through a long list and picked an item to make a point. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have anything else for Jeff? Okay. Now, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2024-14, which is the resolution on approving the work plan and getting quarterly updates?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Is there a second?
Backus.
Roosevelt, that did not come through. I saw your mouth move, but it didn't come through.
Any further discussion? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, can I raise, I can't find the hand raise. Can I just say a few things? I just want to say to echo Councilmember Balducci, I want to say thank you for this. I know that was a lot of work to put that together. I like the right level. I like the updates that we've been getting today. I think that feels really good to share with not just the board, but also the public about how things are going. And I do want to also support the idea of looking more at outcomes and get away with some of the details. So we're really being clear about what things we're achieving. But I do really want to thank you for this work. I'm excited to vote for it.
Thank you, Member Burney. Any other discussion? If not, I have a sense that we can go with just a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions?
Abstain.
Hearing none, the motion's passed. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to our last item of business, entering into executive session to discuss personnel matters and with our legal representation. And we plan to be in executive session for 30 minutes. And we should return at 11:40 to adjourn. So we will now move to executive session.
So Austin, I'm sorry, is there another link for this one?
Yeah, I'll send it right on over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. For your benefit, we will be extending our executive session for another 15 minutes. We will return back here at 11:55 to adjourn. Thank you.
Members of the public, executive session has concluded. The board is coming back now. You're at 7 of 9. And 9. Remember, Balducci is coming on in now. 9 of 9, Chair. We are all here.
Okay. Well, with that, we're now going to move to adjourn the meeting. I want to thank you all for coming to this meeting this morning. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Bye, y'all.